in this particular case, the Republicans were right.
So you think the Republicans are sort of an extreme fringe party?
No, I don't think that they're an extreme fringe party. I think that they're operating against those they believe are extreme on the left. Like, for example, when you talk about the LGBTQ community, I'm a fiscal conservative and I'm a social liberal. Mm-hmm. I'm fiscal with my dollars. I ain't apologizing for not wanting to pay high taxes to anybody. I'm not apologizing for that, right? But outside of that, I'm pretty liberal. Live and let live.
Stephen A. Smith shed light on the situation by explicitly criticizing Sunny Host for supporting the same kind of wokeness that led to the Dink's loss in the previous year's elections. It is evident that the party's pursuit of extreme policies played a significant role in their downfall. But Sunny keeps acting as if none of that matters, claiming that their defeat was unrelated to the voters' rejection of their lavish ideas.
I'm pretty liberal. Live and let live, okay? But you had folks on the left that were introducing some things when we got in the whole transgender issue, and they were talking about bathrooms, or they were talking about males transitioning to females and competing against girls in sports and stuff like that.
These are issues. 1% of the population.
I understand that,
but you know what?
But I think that's where the mistake is made.
Yeah.
You're saying it's ridiculous. I don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
But most of the voters out there don't think like that.
But that means they don't have the information.
Okay, but 90% of the voters don't have the information.
Many people still say they miss Kamala Harris, yet the Dink lost the election, and a major reason was its intense focus on cultural messaging that many families felt ignored their everyday concerns. Parents spoke up and felt brushed aside, especially on issues involving schools, sports, and privacy, where they believed common sense was being replaced by rigid ideology. Families questioned policies they felt were unfair to their children, particularly when clear physical differences were involved, and these worries were far from rare. Instead of listening or trying to persuade skeptics through discussion, party leaders often responded by labeling disagreement as intolerance. That approach didn't just frustrate voters, it backfired. Sports, classrooms, and family life aren't places people want treated like social experiments. Many voters were simply asking for leadership grounded in basic facts, fairness, and practical judgment rather than constant tests framed as moral progress.
If you're out there busting your tail to make ends meet and to pay your bills, and you're going to work every day, and you got a family to take care of, and you got to say, you in New York City, you get stuck 2 hours of your day, get stuck in traffic. You understand? You got a whole bunch of stuff to go through. You don't have time to know what you and I know.
Maybe you need to listen to the news when you're in traffic.
Well, again,
maybe
I agree
not
with that. Or listen to stuff that's going to take you away from the things that brings down your spirit. And that's unfortunately what most voters do.
Most Americans are simply too busy managing real life to carefully examine every idea placed in front of them. Between long work hours, family responsibilities, bills, and daily pressures, few people have the time or energy to sort through dense research, endless data, or expert panels debating theories that rarely touch their everyday reality. So when something feels confusing, impractical, or disconnected from their lives, they tend to reject it outright, and it's hard to fault them for that. The average person isn't focused on cultural labels or the latest ideological trend coming out of Washington. Their concerns are far more basic: staying afloat, keeping their families secure, and planning for the future. Rising prices for food, fuel, housing, and healthcare weigh heavily on their minds. They care far less about abstract arguments or classroom lectures on identity, and far more about safe neighborhoods, reliable jobs, and affordable places to live. In the end, it's financial reality, not philosophy, that most strongly shapes how they vote.
Because you were inserted, even though you were the vice president and it was the Biden-Harris administration, you had folks who are independent. I'm not talking about those on the right. I'm not talking about those on the left, just independents, who said, wait a minute, she didn't experience a primary either. The last time we saw her in a primary was 4 years ago, and she didn't even make it to Iowa. They used that as an excuse to point to her level of inexperience. Then you got the war in Russia and Ukraine. You got the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, Hamas and Hezbollah and all of that stuff. And you had Trump using codes. Look, do you want her? Where is she? Where's the interviews? Where's she showing herself? Where's the tough questions? Where's the interrogation? And he leaned on certain things.
Harris has never really been popular, even as vice president. Voters appeared to be pressing her rather than selecting her from the start. That hostility only grew stronger as her policies advanced toward full-blown wokeness. Smith highlights how the average American felt alienated by this transformation. Instead of actual solutions to urgent problems, people are tired of political theory being forced onto them. But he goes beyond policy. He berates Harris for steering clear of challenging interviews. These are the high-stress conversations that show a leader's strength, confidence, and skill. Instead of accepting the challenge, Harris opted to avoid criticism, which raised doubts about her abilities and readiness. Smith's critique makes clear why voters rejected Hillary so strongly.
Does everybody remember he originally said he was just going to do it for 4 years?
Right. That's what I brought up.
Right. And did you think that once you know who stepped in, he said, well, there's nobody, we don't have anybody?
Well, the point is that it's not about who you're going up against when you know you're not what you used to be. And see, this is where covering sports puts me at a distinct advantage. I cover people every day where it's time for you to go, but you're holding on and you don't want to leave. People who cover the world of sports are accustomed to seeing that all the time. You are the left, you leaned, and you were a prisoner to the extreme left in a lot of people's eyes. Well, guess what? Most of America doesn't operate on the fringes. Whether you're left or you're right, you're relatively centered.
Stephen A. Smith summed it up clearly when he argued that the most radical voices within the Democratic Party slowly took control and threw the balance off. Rather than pushing back or setting limits, much of the mainstream and center left stayed quiet, and that silence spoke louder than any speech ever could. Many everyday Americans felt the party was drifting too far, adopting language and ideas that seemed confusing, divisive, or even risky. By refusing to draw clear boundaries, Democrats allowed the label of being woke to define them entirely. After the election loss, some of the same figures rushed to insist they were never really part of that movement, but by then, the damage was done. Voters had already decided the party had traded common sense for rigid ideology. As Smith pointed out, pretending otherwise after losing isn't a plan, it's a realization that came far too late and revealed just how out of touch they had become.
The problem is those on the fringes continuously push for you to get everything you want.
Yeah.
They're not about getting things done. They're about getting their way. And if they're not going to get their way, they're about complaining and griping about it because they understand that when you are operating based off of grievance, that's usually what provokes you to get to the polls. And that is why they don't mind feeling aggrieved and displaying and disseminating that kind of message, because they know people are going to gravitate to that. And as a result, that might get them to the polls, you thinking you're going to get what you want as a result.
If she stepped outside their strict ideological lines, she risked losing her standing within the party, so giving in was hardly a surprise. The more activist wing of the Democrats has a reputation for demanding full agreement, not winning people over through discussion or careful reasoning. When someone resists, they often face sharp accusations or pressure that can affect their reputation or career, which discourages open disagreement. Harris chose loyalty, assuming it would shield her and keep her political future secure. Instead, that choice tied her more tightly to rigid thinking and pushed away many everyday voters who value independence and balance. Rather than strengthening her position, it weakened it. Once people sensed the shift was more about pleasing insiders than speaking honestly, they turned away, and the strategy backfired.
Do you think the Republicans are sort of an extreme fringe party?
No, I don't think that they're an extreme fringe party. I think that they're operating against those they believe are extreme on the left. Like, for example, when you talk about the LGBTQ community, I'm pretty liberal. Live and let live, okay?
Yeah.
But you had folks on the left that were introducing some things when we got in the whole transgender issue, and they were talking about bathrooms, or they were talking about males transitioning to females and competing against girls in sports and stuff like that.
After that, Sunny Host offered her the usual nonsense, which was not surprising. She distorted what Stephen A. Smith had said, as was to be expected. The Republican Party was never once described by Smith as a fringe movement. To avoid confronting the real issue and his message, Sunny made up the straw man. In actuality, Smith's statements were clear-cut and simple. The woke left had taken over and imprisoned the Democratic Party with radical policies and cultural initiatives that alienated ordinary America. Democrats let the radicals define them. Meanwhile, Republicans stepped in to counteract the left's cultural decline and doctrinal overreach.
Howard Stern says that he wasn't confident that the country was ready to elect the first female president because he knows, quote, how men talk behind closed doors about us. So So we're very privileged to have a great guy here today.
Yeah.
So what do men say about us behind
Well,
closed
first of all,
Yeah. Say it to our face. Do tell.
I don't hide, so no worries there. Here's the deal. I respectfully disagree with Howard Stern, only from the standpoint that I wish he had been more specific. Why don't you say white men? Because let me tell you something about black men. We love our mamas.
I know that.
We love.
It's long past time for America to move away from the idea that leadership roles should be handed out based solely on identity. Representation matters, but a presidential candidate should never be chosen simply because of gender. The country faces serious challenges: economic uncertainty, border concerns, healthcare struggles, rising crime, and growing competition abroad. And none of these can be solved with slogans or symbolic gestures. They demand steady, capable, results-focused leadership. Leaders should be selected for their vision, their willingness to make hard choices, and their record of real achievement, not for who they are on paper. Women who aspire to the presidency should be ready to demonstrate the strength, judgment, discipline, and resilience the role requires. America will support a female president when that confidence is earned through ability and performance, not treated as a box to check. The recent Democratic loss wasn't a rejection of women or progress. It was a rejection of weak leadership, political theater, and nonstop ideological messaging. Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton didn't fall short because they were women, but because many voters saw uncertainty, poor decision-making, and a disconnect from everyday Americans. Instead of focusing on urgent concerns like the economy, border security, inflation, and public safety, the conversation shifted toward divisive identity debates that pushed many people away. As Stephen A. Smith argued, the most extreme voices ended up steering the party, and by refusing to break away, Democrats sealed their own outcome. America is ready for a woman president, but she should be chosen for her skill, courage, and clear vision, not as a symbol. That brings this video to a close. If you found it worthwhile, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.